All right, so today I'm going to try to give you my personal valuation attempt of Aduro Clean Technologies, ticker ADUR. And okay, we're going to start with a pessimistic case. Yeah, I'm going to explain why I made certain assumptions the way I did them, but I think this is a pretty pessimistic case if things go um, the way they are. So for this, I assumed a revenue per ton of 12.50. So I think this is pretty reasonable. Some would say, oh, that's a little bit too high, but looking at all the tax incentives and the quality of the product that Aduro will give us, plus their optionality where they can really like dial in which product they want to produce, I think that's pretty reasonable. And for this, we're going to assume they're going to go only through royalties, where they're going to license their technology to like ExxonMobil or Total Energies. And for this, we're going to assume that the royalty will be 20% of revenues, which, if you look at the older presentations of Aduro, that's what the management assumed. So here we're going to get a royalty per ton of $250 per ton. So I think in a pessimistic case, we can assume that like they're gonna be at 70% margins. So it's net profit margins, EBITDA margins, whatever. Just gonna assume 70%. I think that's again like the case says pretty pessimistic, but I think that's safe to say because they're gonna have pretty much zero costs, right? They just get the check in the mail from the royalties, and I mean I think that's reasonable. So with the 250 per ton combined with the 70% margin, we get 175 USD per ton of plastics recycled. So next, global plastic production per year in tons is, from what I was able to find, was around 460 million tons. Some sources say 400 million tons, but I'm just going to assume 460 million tons, which comes from the UN. Is the data I was able to find, and let's assume Aduro's share of that global market's 1%. Now, I'm gonna later go into the cases where the share is gonna be significantly higher than 1% because, if they actually have the best plastic recycling technology in the world, and from what I was able to find, one of the only technologies that's actually profitable without any subsidies. Percentage could be significantly higher, but for now we're going to assume 1%, and later on I'm going to show you what the numbers look like if the percentage is higher. So what this means is simply 175 bucks per ton multiplied by the 4.6 million tons that Aduro would recycle a year. That would mean around 800 million bucks of profit. This is like pure profit, pretty much. And we're going to assume, because it's the pessimistic case, I think this is really 20 multiple is very pessimistic, especially considering that the company at this stage is probably going to be growing really, really quickly. And like a 20 multiple, a lot of companies that pretty much don't grow almost at all get a 20 multiple. So this is very pessimistic. I think this is like, yeah, might be one of the most pessimistic assumptions here in the whole case. So just assuming that, and we use 39 million fully diluted share count. I think that's reasonable right now. Yeah, so that means Aduro's market cap at these assumptions is going to be $16 billion. And so if you break it down, like I said, with the 37 million of fully diluted share count, that means the fair price for an Aduro share per percentage of global share is 435 bucks. So what this means is at 1% share, the fair price is 435 using pessimistic assumptions. But again, this is per percent of global share. And now we're going to look at what the numbers look like with different percentages of global share. So if Aduro only will be able to get a 0.1% global share, then even at this price, even in this case, the price is still 44 bucks. And we can look down here. If we assume a 10% global share, then the fair price in the pessimistic case is 4,300 bucks. So as of time of recording, Aduro's share price is around $16. So looking at this is like a 250x. So that's pretty good. It's almost close to 300x, looking at 10% share. But even in this case, it's still a massive, massive upside. So looking at this, you can make your own conclusions of if the share price currently is undervalued or overvalued. So now we're going to look at the optimistic case. And here I made a little bit different assumptions, which I still think are not crazy. These are not like pie in the sky assumptions. I think it's still very reasonable. So for revenue per ton, instead of 1250, I assume 2000, especially considering all the subsidies the European Union gives and all the incentives that companies will have. There are plastic taxes that companies will save if they use a recycled product. So I think this 2000 a ton might seem a little bit high, but if you actually do the math and especially with the quality of product and all the tax incentives, all the government subsidies that they might get, all the plastic tax avoidance, etc., I think is a reasonable for an optimistic case. And here we're going to assume a royalty rate of 25%. This is based on because management itself assumed in their prior presentations a 20% royalty rate. And from my experience, the Aduro management has been pretty conservative in the past. So I think this, especially with how, good the technology is, I think that's pretty reasonable. So in this case, we get 500 bucks per ton in pure royalties. And here I assumed instead of 70%, I assumed the 80% profit margins, which I think is pretty reasonable. I don't think it's insane, right? Because these 500 bucks come with pretty much zero costs, right? They're going to have some overhead, some corporate costs, some marketing, some engineers that help the royalty partners, etc. But I think that's not crazy, right? So this means Aduro will have 400 bucks of pure profit per ton. And again, these assumptions stay the same. So that means Aduro will, at 1% of global production, will be at almost 2 billion profit per year, which here we use a 30 times multiple and not a 20 times, which even this I think is really not that crazy. I think I could have used like a 40x here, but let's just stick with 30x. That would mean about 55 billion market cap. And with 37 million fully diluted shares, the fair share price is 1,500 if Aduro recycles just 1%. And in this case, where Aduro gets 10% global market share of plastic production and recycling, it's 15,000 USD per share. And again, currently around 9 to 10% of global plastic production is recycled, mostly in PET. So, 90% of plastic is still, ready to go, and Aduro can get it pretty much almost for free, I would say. But in this case, it doesn't matter because they just get a revenue royalty. So which estimate you personally want to use is up to you. So I can bring them on the same screen here. So as you see, the difference is pretty severe. It's about 3 times more, just because we use slightly higher revenue per ton assumptions, higher royalty rate, higher profit margin, and a higher earnings multiple. Like I said, I think optimistic case might be not actually too crazy. Especially, I think the big kicker will be the price to earnings multiple. So, if there is a lot of enthusiasm in the company, it might be, instead of 20x or 30x, it might be 100x if people get really excited. But you don't really have to assume that. I think all these estimates are pretty reasonable. I think 37 million fully diluted shares is also pretty reasonable. Right now, there are at 36-ish fully diluted. And I think to fund the demo project, they will probably get around 1 million shares of dilution at current prices. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, but I think that's pretty reasonable. So, I think even if you go pessimistic case, even if you go 0.5% share, 218 bucks And as of the recording date, the shares are at $16. So, I mean, yeah. So that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching and see you next time.